Hi guy, welcome back TV Spoilers. Why not reveal that on our TV Spoilers channel? I'm always looking for content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and more interesting insights. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series. Mariah is entering a stretch of days where every choice feels like a trap disguised as an escape. What is happening around her is no longer a series of separate incidents, but a single downward line each hour pulling her closer to a point of no return. The name Ian Ward hangs over Mariah like a toxic fog. He doesn't need to stand in front of her to make the air feel unbreathable. Memory does the work. Fear does the work. The past never truly left, it simply changed its method of attack. And when someone has lived in a state of vigilance for too long, they begin to see everything through the lens of dread until that dread becomes the only truth they can still believe. The most frightening part is that Mariah isn't just facing a mental crisis. She is being dragged into a widening scandal tied to Ian Ward's disappearance. In Genoa City, suspicion doesn't need proof to become contagious. All it takes is a whisper to shred a reputation, to turn sympathetic eyes into guarded stares, to transform concern into accusation. The moment Ian's name is placed beside Mariah's, people start searching for connections, building narratives, assembling evidence from fragments and assumptions. And in a world where rumors move faster than facts, Mariah can be judged long before anyone in authority lays a hand on her. The legal trouble is no longer distant. The possibility that Mariah will be arrested and brought to trial after a failed kidnapping hangs over her like an unsigned sentence waiting to be stamped. Everything around her tightens, as if doors are quietly closing. Christine's presence in this arc is not incidental. It signals the law moving from the edges of the story into its center. A new client is coming, and the way the pieces are shifting makes it clear Mariah may become the storm's focal point. It grows even darker with the looming risk of charges being strengthened if Will Hensley testifies about the choking incident. A testimony like that would not simply describe an act, it would help form a complete picture that the court could interpret in the worst possible way. Mariah is someone with trauma, with extremes in her recent history, with a pattern of being pulled into dangerous situations. And too often, those factors do not earn mercy in legal rooms. They produce doubt about stability and self-control. Yet even if the will-related evidence becomes a sharp point in a growing file, Mariah is sliding toward another crimey one that will become the core of her current storyline. This is no longer about what she might be accused of, it is about what she is drifting into doing. And what detonates everything is not greed or revenge, but love twisted by panic, the question of who will care for Dominic. For many people, that is a practical concern. For Mariah, in her collapsing state, it becomes a life or death obsession. The kind of thought that can snap whatever restraint she has left. Dominic becomes her last anchor. And when someone is terrified of losing their anchor, they will do anything to keep hold of it, even if they are pulling themselves under in the process. Mariah is not simply worried, her fear has seized the steering wheel. Things have deteriorated to the point where her emotions no longer follow ordinary order. She begins to blur the lines between protecting and possessing, between caring and taking away. In her mind, the outside world starts to look like a threat. Anyone could take Dominic from her. Anyone could decide she is unfit. Anyone could declare that her brokenness makes her dangerous. And the more that fear grows, the more it manufactures proof for itself, because the more unstable Mariah becomes, the more people will conclude she should never be near Dominic. It is the cruelest loop. She fears losing him, so she unravels, so she becomes more likely to lose him. Over all of it, Ian Ward remains the shadow. Dominic may be part of the new path Ian imagines for Mariah, or Mariah may be carving her own desperate route, but either way, she is certain to pursue it with the ferocity of someone who no longer believes she has another option. When a person has been haunted by Ian long enough, they may start to believe the only way to survive him is to follow the warped logic he planted inside them. Sometimes what they call freedom is merely a new form of captivity, wrapped in the illusion of control. Then the truth no one wants to say out loud comes into focus. All signs point to Mariah kidnapping Dominic and fleeing to an unknown place. This is not the move of a cold strategist, it is the lunge of someone drowning, grabbing at the only thing she believes can keep her alive. But the law does not measure despair. The law measures actions. Whatever Mariah's motive, love, terror, survival, taking Dominic without anyone's knowledge will be called by one word: kidnapping. And once that word is spoken, the world will never look at her the same way again. The fallout becomes immediate and unavoidable, pulling Devin, Abby, Daniel, and Tessa into the vortex. None of them can stand outside it because Dominic is not just a child. He is the center of a family structure that has already survived too much pressure. For Abby and Devin, fear strikes straight into instinct, the fear of losing their son. That fear can become fire, paralysis, or ruthless determination to get him back at any cost. Daniel is pulled in not because he chooses it, but because this has crossed beyond ordinary drama into a crisis capable of destroying multiple lives in a matter of hours. And Tessa, closest to Mariah, will be split down the middle between compassion and betrayal. Tessa understands that Mariah is breaking, but that understanding only deepens the pain when she watches Mariah turn suffering into an act the world will not forgive. A large-scale search becomes inevitable. The moment Dominic vanishes, Genoa City will feel as though all the oxygen has been drained from it. Calls will stack on top of calls. Doors will be thrown open. Faces will burn with exhaustion from sleepless nights. And the silence between updates will feel unbearable as everyone asks the same unspoken question: what if the worst has already happened? In Mariah's mind, she may believe she is reclaiming control, but she is actually triggering a social and legal response she cannot stop. Every hour that passes will sharpen desperation, and desperation always invites extreme choices. Detective Burrow will even step in to assist as Abby and Devin travel by private plane to some location tied to the hunt. That detail changes the tone completely. This is no longer simply a family emergency. It is becoming a case. The moment a detective is involved, the question stops being where did Mariah go and becomes what did Mariah do? Where is Dominic? And is he in danger? Abby and Devin using a private jet doesn't only show resources. It shows the level of urgency has reached a point where they cannot afford to lose a single minute. It is the image of a family pushed to the edge of throwing everything they have into a race against time. Because in situations like this, time is always the enemy. And as the search expands, Mariah becomes more trapped. Running on panic is not the same as having a plan. The farther she goes, the more she must face the reality that there is no truly safe place when an entire city is looking for you. Every small trace can become a lead. Every impulsive decision can become evidence. Every time Mariah tells herself she is protecting Dominic, she may be placing them both in greater danger. That is the most brutal paradox. An act born from a protective instinct becomes the very thing that threatens the child most. Sooner or later, Mariah will be caught, hopefully before she crosses an even darker line. But hope begins to sound like a prayer because clarity does not always arrive in time. Sometimes a person only recognizes the damage when cold metal closes around their wrist, when a heavy door locks, when familiar faces stare at them as if they no longer know who they are. And in that moment, Mariah may finally understand that she has turned her greatest fear into reality. She feared losing Dominic, and her actions may have made that loss permanent. It is obvious Mariah has suffered a severe mental breakdown, and that may become part of her legal defense strategy. Yet this is where the story tightens into its most agonizing tension. A breakdown can explain, but it cannot erase consequences. Bringing mental collapse into a defense may help others understand that Mariah wasn't fully rational, but it also deepens another risk, that she will be viewed as unsafe. Someone who must be controlled, someone who should not be near Dominic for a long time. For Mariah, that might feel like a sentence worse than prison, because it strikes directly at the most vulnerable place in her. The terror of being stripped of the right to care, stripped of belonging, stripped of family. So the storyline becomes more than a kidnapping or a trial. It becomes a war between the version of herself Mariah is trying to protect and the version of her that the world is now constructing. It becomes a war between love and self-destructs, between inner truth she is terrified and shattered and legal truth she has done something unforgivable. And the deeper she sinks into that war, the more she is trapped in a question with no clean answer. If she admits she was wrong, she may lose Dominic. If she clings to the belief she was right, she may destroy every chance of forgiveness forever. As night falls and the net tightens, Genoa City will stop asking did Mariah really do this and start asking where is Mariah? And what will she do next? Abby and Devin will be driven into decisions they never imagined they could make. Daniel and Tessa will be trapped as unwilling witnesses to a tragedy where love is not strong enough to stop a catastrophic mistake. And at the center of it all, Mariah will face her defining moment. She either lets go and allows Dominic to be brought home, or she takes one more step to prove she still has the right to choose a step that could send her life completely off the map. And then comes the chilling hook, just as the search seems to be closing in. And every trail appears to point in a single direction. An unexpected report stops everyone. Cole Dominic is spotted somewhere no one predicted. And that can only mean one of two things. Either Mariah has gone farther than anyone imagined, or there is a hidden detail in her escape that is only now surfacing that could turn the rescue into an uncontrollable confrontation in the next episode. Christine is stepping back in at the exact moment Mariah needs something stronger than comfort, something concrete, something with weight, something that can stand up in a courtroom and also withstand the storm of public judgment already gathering around her. In the bleak picture Mariah has pushed herself into, justice is no longer an inspiring idea. It is a survival question. Will she still be seen as a human being who is falling apart? Or will she be reduced to a criminal label that leaves no room for nuance, context, or mercy? That is the razor-thin line where Christine's role becomes unmistakable. She is not returning to help in a casual sense. She is returning as a lawyer Simeon who can take the chaotic, broken pieces of Mariah's story and rebuild them into a structure with logic, context, and clarity, strong enough to force the people eager to convict her to stop and look again. The 2026 previews only make Christine's involvement feel less like coincidence and more like fate. If the signals are pointing to Christine taking Mariah's case, then Mariah's crisis is no longer private, it has become an official file. A formal battle where every misstep will be dissected and every gap will be filled by someone else's assumptions. In a town where scandal spreads faster than truth, having Christine stand in front of the narrative is not simply about arguing law. It is about reclaiming the right to tell the story correctly. Mariah is already weak, and she becomes weaker when she is forced to defend herself from charges while also trying to hold together what is collapsing inside her. Without someone calm, precise, and unflinching to anchor the line of reason, Mariah will be dragged under by her own fear and by the people waiting for her to break completely, so they can call it proof. That is where Christine can do what she does best, separate facts from emotional noise, without stripping the situation of its humanity. Defending Mariah does not necessarily mean pretending nothing happened. It means demanding that the system admit an uncomfortable truth. Mariah did not arrive at this moment in a normal mental state, and the explosion was the result of a chain of pressure, trauma, and unraveling that no one is allowed to erase from the context. Christine can become the person who draws a clear boundary between act and circumstance, between a charge and its cause, between easy punishment and an outcome that is both lawful and humane. Once Christine steps in, the chaos begins to take shape, and that shape is the only thing that can keep Mariah from being crushed by quick conclusions. And while many people might instinctively think of Michael Baldwin as another possible way out, reality is colder than that. Michael helped Sharon Newman out of legal trouble before, and that says something about both his skill and his instinct. Knows how to find the opening that keeps someone from being buried alive by the consequences of a terrible moment. But Mariah is not Sharon in this context, and Michael is not operating with the same freedom, because this case strikes directly at what Victor Newman considers untouchable: family, control, and the pride of a man who refuses to be challenged. Mariah took Victor's grandson, and that single fact is enough to turn the situation into a power issue, not merely a legal one. If Victor is furious, his anger will not be aimed at Mariah as an individual alone. It will be aimed at anyone who tries to help her in a way that makes Victor feel his authority is slipping. That is why Michael's ability to step in for Mariah becomes fragile. Not because he lacks the ability, but because another hand can tighten around his choices. Victor could forbid, and in Victor's world, forbidding is not just a statement. It is an order wrapped in expectation, loyalty, and the unspoken threat that anyone who disobeys will pay a price. The more Mariah is seen as the person who stole something that belongs to the Newman family, the more Victor will want to turn the case into a warning. And once Victor stands on the opposite side, Michael's support stops being a simple question of right and wrong. It becomes a question of whether Michael is willing to clash with a man who demands absolute allegiance. If Michael is locked down by his obligations to Victor, Mariah loses a potential lifeline, and the pressure shifts even harder onto Christine. She is no longer just representing Mariah. She is representing the last credible chance Mariah has to avoid being ground into dust by the combined force of the law and Victor's rage. But even if Christine can protect Mariah from the harshest legal outcome, the story still carries a deeper layer on that makes the fight for justice both necessary and painful. Because Mariah does not only need to escape legal trouble, she needs to escape herself in her current state. If everything ends at winning or losing in court, then regardless of the verdict, Mariah may still be a shattered shadow. Only the location changes. Whether she is released or confined, The most alarming issue is not the word criminal. It is the reality that Mariah is collapsing and needs real treatment before tragedy repeats itself in another form. The strongest hope now is that Mariah will be moved to a psychiatric unit with doctors who truly know what they are doing. Somewhere she is seen as a patient requiring serious intervention, not as a case to be processed quickly and discarded. That hope becomes even more urgent when placed beside the memory of Boston, a clinic that did nothing to help. That failure is not just a location or a bad medical experience. It is a symbol of abandonment inside the very process meant to save her. When someone tries to heal and is met with disappointment, they begin to lose faith that healing is even possible. And when faith collapses, panic, obsession, and reckless decisions return with more force. If Boston was supposed to stabilize Mariah but changed nothing, then placing her in genuinely competent care is no longer an optional improvement. It is the minimum requirement for her to have any chance of returning to herself. What makes the atmosphere so tense is that the law and Mariah's mental health are colliding like trains speeding toward each other. On one side is the demand for accountability, for explanation, for consequences. On the other side is the reality that Mariah has deteriorated beyond normal functioning. Christine may try to hold both truths together in a defense strategy, but the world around Mariah will not be patient. Abby and Devin may see only the fear of losing Dominic and the fury of violation. Victor may see only humiliation and a challenge to his control. And when those emotions dominate, the space for recognizing Mariah's need for treatment shrinks, crushed by the hunger to punish. In that environment, Christine is not only arguing against charges, she is fighting a tidal wave of judgment where everyone believes they have the right to decide who Mariah is and what she deserves. So Christine taking the case is not simply a professional development. It is the sign of a long fight to keep Mariah from being defined by the worst moment of her life. Michael may once have been the door Sharon walked through, but that door may close in Mariah's face because of Victor. And as familiar exits shut one by one, Christine becomes the rare path, still a path that offers no easy comfort, but at least offers direction. While everyone else is focused on Mariah as a threat, the darker possibility is that Mariah may start to see herself that way too. Someone hunted for long enough begins to wonder if they are still worth saving. Someone labeled as the person who took Dominic begins to question whether they have the right to call anything love. And if Mariah slips into self-condemnation, she becomes more likely to give up, more likely to let the worst outcome happen. That is why Christine's return matters like a rope thrown into a pit, not only to pull Mariah away from charges, but to pull her away from the belief that trying to be better is pointless. Yet even as Christine prepares to stand in front of Mariah, one harsh truth remains in the air like a blade. Victor is not a man who is easily persuaded, and his anger could make this case far more dangerous than any ordinary courtroom fight. If Victor decides this is about pride and power, then no matter how skilled Christine is, she may be facing a wall that logic cannot always penetrate. And that is what pushes the story into its most frightening territory. Mariah needs to be saved by law and by medicine, but she is trapped between people who see the situation as revenge. All the tension tightens into one point. Christine can step in to pull Mariah away from every charge in the legal sense. But can she pull Mariah away from her next psychological collapse before the system locks the doors to real treatment? Because if Mariah is not placed in true expert grief, she is processed like a file that needs a quick conclusion. Then the cost will not only be a sentence. The cost may be Mariah permanently becoming the person she fears most. And if that happens, no courtroom victory will ever be worthy of the name justice.